that you think you could run your favourite cricket team better than those who do. But no one is going to let you do that. So why not try Wicket Cricket Manager to satisfy that urge? Pick your nation, pick your league, pick your players, and yell at them when they do poorly. You can find it in the links below or by searching for Wicket Cricket Manager in your app store today. If you're enjoying these live chats, our main channel has even more World Cup videos looking at the greatest performances, the quirkiest stats, and the epic tales of World Cup cricket. Morning, everyone. Welcome to the Scoreboard. I'm Jared Kimber. Many questions that need to be asked. Can India still win games without a top order? Can Australia win the World Cup being able to play in at all? Can KRL play under pressure now? Will Marnus review this show? All these questions will probably not be answered today, but there's plenty more to be talking about. But let's just do a quick recap of the game. Australia started slow but didn't lose any wickets. And then India stopped them completely through Ashwin, Jadeja and Kuldeep. And eventually, though, Australia's tail did hang around and put on something so that India still had to chase 200. The game was completely over at the halfway point until about 5 minutes after India's innings started. Stark did Stark things. Hazelwood chipped in for a couple of times. And right up until the point that Mitch Marsh's balls were involved, Australia had a very, very, very good chance at winning this game. To more accurately quote Steve Waugh, or do you realize you've just cost your team the match, Mitch? Whether he said that to himself in the mirror or I don't know. From there on in, India had the dewy conditions very well. Played some good cricket all the way through and conditions all the way through very, very well. Ended up with a tidy little net run rate bump, right? Like everything went the direction that it should have. And so very, very good effort from that perspective. Australia's going to have to head back to the nets. But let us start the show, shall we? Actually, just give me 2 seconds here. Have a quick break, and then we'll start. This video is brought to you by Wicket Cricket Manager. If you're enjoying these live chats, our main channel has even more World Cup videos looking at the greatest performances, the quirkiest stats, and the epic tales of World Cup cricket. All right, let's look at what happened and how it happened and when it happened and all the different things that we have here, all the happenings of this game. Scoreboard with Jared Kimber. Right, let's start with Jadeja. I thought he was the most interesting part of this game. Certainly early on, obviously it got interesting and weird slightly more. He had a very good day. Last 2 years, he started to find some ODI bowling form before, but there's something else worth thinking about when it comes to Asia in general. His record at home, I think he averages around 30 in India. He averages 32 in neutral locations, and his average is 50. This tournament is at home. We expect him to do a lot. And this wicket is not just that, right? The most homes of homes that Jadeja actually has. And for because of that, he's played 42 T20 matches at this location. By far the most that he's done before. He's averaging 24 and going at less than 7 runs and over when he's playing for Chennai or even away at this stadium. The worst bit, I think, for Australia is that they knew this was going to happen. They knew they were facing Jadeja in this situation and everything else, and they still couldn't actually get off the train track and got completely steamrolled. So certainly not ideal from that perspective. The other big thing, I suppose, was the stiff part of it. His average by bowling in this ODIs, there was, when these sorts of things happen, you start to look for patterns or anything else. You can see he gets left arm orthodox. He's absolutely fine. This was the 11th time that Jadeja had dismissed him across all formats. And so we did actually look this up and to see if it was a major problem. Against left arm orthodox in ODI cricket, we could see that his average is fine overall. And he had 222 runs off 188 dismissals against Jadeja in one-day cricket coming into this game. So the all format issues of him getting 11 times across all cricket probably don't mean as much as perhaps some people might have thought they would. And one of the reasons that they don't mean that much is that these two guys have faced each other like 1,000 times. In fact, when you say something like 1,000 times, usually that's just a phrase, right? It doesn't really mean anything. How about this? Smith has faced 1,016 balls from Jadeja in my database. That's across international cricket and T20 cricket. These guys have faced each other like 1,000 times. 11 dismissals actually seems like a fairly decent number, all things considered, right across. And you know, Jadeja was maybe the catalyst early on, although I thought Ashwin bowled very, very well. But really, this could be a shout out to all the spinners, right? India used, and I think actually India could have used any of their top 6 spinners at all in this game. So, you know, who would you put in? Chahal, Akshar, Ravi Bishnoi. And I think they would have done okay because of A, Australia don't play spin very well, but B, more specifically, just the way that the conditions were a little bit in their favour from that perspective. So great effort from the Indian spinners today, and there's a lot more on that. But let's stick with the major India side of this because they won the game, and I like to, you know, I like to reward teams by talking about their victories rather than going into how miserable the other team were. We'll get to that. Don't worry. This is the Zampa over. I thought from the batting perspective, you know, obviously didn't go very well at the top. But when Mitch Marsh didn't take that catch off Virat Kohli, that was the last chance that India really gave. And from there, it was all about the partnership. They handled the early pressure very well, those two players, and then they moved through the gears. And after the new ball, Zampa was the second major issue that they were going to have to face. And you can just have a look at just how well KL Rahul plays this particular over. This is a really, really key over. And it's these last two balls we want to focus on here. That's a wrong one. He picks it and he plays it beautifully. It's not normally where you would hit a wrong one, right? Because the ball's spinning back into you. Beautiful placement there. And then this one, again, wrists, placement. It was over pitch, don't get me wrong. It was probably the worst ball in this over. But again, a lot of players in world cricket probably just hitting that for a single. And yet in KL Rahul's case, he's hit it all the way through. Essentially, what the batters, I think, would have been talking about out in the middle is you want to try and get past the new ball. They didn't do that. You want to make sure that Zampa has as little impact as possible. And then the third thing would have been either reverse swing or some sort of, you know, Herculean effort by one of the Australian seamers later on. And then the only other issue that you have is going to be how stuck you get, or if you have a soft dismissal in that middle period. And I thought that's what they did really, really well. And you could see just how much they both played to their strengths. This was up on the broadcast. You could see that, you know, KL Rahul basically hitting everything to the offside, really scoring quite well on the offside. And Virat Kohli scoring very well on the leg side. They didn't take any unnecessary risks. They played to both of their strengths. When they were bad balls, they handled it. They could have probably pushed this a little bit more if they'd wanted to and gone for the net run rate a lot earlier than they finally did. I don't think there was any reason for them to do that, though, because, you know, Australia is still, especially any team with Mitchell Starc in it in one-day cricket, the very few times he actually plays one-day cricket. You know, I think from that perspective, that you always have to watch yourself a little bit. So this was as gentle and comfortable a walk through the park as, you know, playing in screaming hot humidity against 90-mile-an-hour bowlers can actually be. But if you look at the actual partnerships in this game, I did find it's fascinating, isn't it? I'm trying to remember if I got that last one right in the end. I can't remember if I updated that. Hopefully someone updated that. But you can see that Australia has the one decent partnership at the start. Then there really isn't anything all the way through. And what is fascinating for India is there's no partnerships at the start at all. And then, of course, towards the end, they get absolutely massive here. So they basically don't make any runs to begin this game. I think I got this graph wrong because there should be a couple more zeros here, but who knows. But the point is, India won this game with one partnership. When you do that, we saw also with the New Zealand game the other day, when you do that, you know, it's a great feeling afterwards, but you'd actually prefer it to be, you know, a little bit more evenly distributed all the way through the team. The opposite, of course, is true from Australia. At the moment, they would have killed for just one partnership of this side. So great effort there by KL Rahul and Virat Kohli, completely in control all the way through. And of course, the conditions played a part as well. And you know, these things are always very important to talk about. But when that dew came in, the pitch did change. And I actually think it's a very fascinating game when you start to break this down a little bit. The Indian seamers looked really good up front. But the ball wasn't doing all that much for them. I just thought they bowled very, very well. And so the spinners were brought on, and that's how obviously they end up essentially winning this game. Australia bowled under completely different conditions. I mean, the 2 wickets might as well have been in 2 different places, right? And the ball did a lot for their seamers. They got lateral movement. They also got the up and down one. They were the 2 balls in a row from Cameron Green to KL Rahul, which I probably should have recorded and forgotten about them. But one keeps low and one goes up. So Australia got lateral movement and up and down movement. But essentially, for their spinners, it skidded on. It was a very different wicket for the spin bowlers. And it's, we saw puffs of dust when India were bowling. Very hard to do that when there's any moisture on the wicket. And it was, I would say that it might have suited the finger spinners slightly more in the back part than it did the wrist spinners. But unfortunately for Australia, they only have one finger spinner, and he's, I was going to say glorified part-timer. What is he? He's like part-time plus Maxwell, I suppose. But the point being, they didn't have what they needed. And, Zampa didn't get the assistance he wanted. I'm not sure he bowled as well as he would have liked as well. He's certainly bowled in Indian conditions like that before. But Australia couldn't crack that partnership. And, perhaps that Australia could have made some slight changes. Now, looking back on what happened, Hazelwood would have bowled a little bit more. Maybe Maxwell wouldn't have come on as early. They would have attacked a little bit with that more while they still had the new ball when it was hard. But very hard to blame the Australian bowlers when the conditions were different, but also they're only defending 200, whereas the Indian bowlers didn't have anything to worry about from that perspective. I'm talking about the Indian bowlers. I thought one of the more interesting things that they actually did in this game is just the way that after Kuldeep Yadav got David Warner, the runs dried up for Australia, but more specifically than the runs, the boundaries dried up for Australia, right? I think this is the thing that is definitely worth having a look at here. You can see that early on, they obviously get one good over, but they're pretty regular through the power play, but also after the power play. This is after the power play. These guys over here after the power play, and then it disappears. Now, they lost regular wickets in this point as well, but they also, you could have a look at the way they were going. They certainly put pressure back on themselves at times. Marnus Labuschagne certainly was not scoring as cleanly as you want. I'm sure Australian fans are already if the Australian fans, nope, I've already got one here. Inglis in for Marnus. They've already decided Marnus can't play after that particular one. But there's no doubt that the Indian bowlers bowl brilliantly. So it's all well and good to say the conditions are in your favour and you have to bowl well, but they bowled very, very well in that, and Australia really struggled. But let's get on to Australia and spin. You said nice things about India. Let's say less nice things about Australia. This is Ashwin's first over. You see that first ball slides on a little bit. This is the 8th over, I think. Looking at the screen, 8th over. You can see that one bounces quite a bit. It's a little bit short, of course, but it goes up quite a bit. And this one probably bounces even more. You could see KL Rahul really taken aback, and then, as Steve Smith does, he has to tell every single person in the ground that something is weird has happened. It's still at the middle of his bat, of course, but he was right. It was this point forward where I basically thought to myself, with my Jared Viz rankings, that Australia went from a decent chance of winning to drop into a position where I didn't think they could make 250. I thought 230, 240 was still on the cards. And it's not specifically that I don't think Australia can play spin well, although more on that in a moment. But it's that I think they're very poor when they see a puff of dust and they start to rethink the way they're batting. They don't have the extra gears that some other batters around the world do. This ball had a puff of dust. It stood up in the wicket a little bit as well. Like a lot of things, I think would have been a problem. But you notice I said before, I didn't think they had a massive problem with spin. Part of this was hidden before in the way that they didn't play as many games and their middle order wasn't always set. But I did find this, and I still think it's worth having a look at, even if Australia doesn't always play with their best 11. So sometimes looking at previous data doesn't help you as much. But this is worth having a look at. Sorry, Ash, you're going to have to take a break here. This is the record of the Australian batters versus spin in that South African, it's pace and spin in that South African series, right? Now you can see here that what I've done is I've got the pace on one side and I've got the spin on the other. And instead of having an economy, I've got runs per 30 balls, but same basic Same basic principle, right? They absolutely slaughtered South Africa's pace in that series, and it was a very weird series. The Australian team. I mean, I'm not sure they ever used. At one stage, I think they were just finding random people in the nets to play in that series, but they smashed pace, and then you could see they struggled here against spin. But I thought, look, it's Maharaj and Shamsi, it's not too bad. But then I remembered there was a part-time spin bowled, and Maharaj and Shamsi, I think, only played 6 of the available 10 spots that they could have played between them. So if you look at this now with Maharaj and Shamsi at the end, there's 2 patterns here. Obviously, the better spinners are going to be better. Fine, we all understand that. It's absolutely not a problem at all. What I found interesting, though, is that the economy doesn't drop as much. Those runs, 30 balls, it's a little bit lower. What's specifically lower right there is the average, right? And I thought that was very, very interesting. And you're talking about South African spinners, but very good South African spinners, but in South Africa. Like for an Australian player playing spin in South Africa, it's not quite like with Australia, but it's very similar to Australia. And so you wouldn't really expect a record quite so bold as this, especially you might say the Australians in the middle overs are knocking them around. So the economy rate goes down a little bit. That's a fair and normal thing to have happen. The average going down here, I don't think is quite the same. And that is very noticeable. And so that wasn't a full strength Australian team. And I think it's very possible Australia picked random guys they found from the MCG nets at times in this particular game. But what I did want to look at is this over a long period of time. And I know Australia have experimented and so many players have, probably faced spin for the Australian team. But when you do go through it, what you will find is that Australia has the 8th worst average of any of these World Cup teams against spin between the last World Cup and this World Cup, right? You can see though that they are scoring and they're the 4th quickest scorers. So that goes back to the Shamsi thing from a moment ago, right? Shamsi and Maharaj thing of scoring isn't their issue. It's literally that they go out a lot is their issue. That's not a good issue to have, everyone. You're going to have an issue, not the one to have. And so, you look at this and you do start to think straight away, there's clearly an issue here. And so what I wanted to look at then next is how they scored, because we know they are scoring at a decent rate. And I want to look at specifically how they scored, because I had a hunch and it played out. It's always nice when a plan comes together, right? So these two look similar, right? Hope this doesn't make anyone dizzy. But the difference is very specifically between this group here, right, and where Australia is. You can see there's a really, really big gap here. Whereas if we go back, it's a lot more jumbled. Everyone's a little bit more together beforehand, right? But there's a really, really big gap over here between these teams and Australia. And what this is this is your boundary rate by your ones, right? You can see that Australia again has the 4th best boundary rate, right? There's absolutely nothing, there's nothing wrong with their boundary rate here at all. But you can see that they have, again, the 8th worst single rate. They can muscle the ball away. This is what we've been saying about Australian players have spin for a long time. They don't have a problem hitting boundaries. They do have a problem in rotating the strike, right? And so what you then get is they take bigger chances. They still score at a decent rate, but 2 things, especially when you come to a World Cup, you are going up against the best spinners in the world. You're not just going up against any ordinary spinner at that time, right? You are going up against the best spinners in the world. You don't want to give them 2 and 3 balls at a row where they can bowl at you. If you look at what happened with Kuldeep and Maxwell today, it's a very, very good example. It was only a couple of balls in a row, but if you're not rotating strike in general, you're just giving the spinner a little bit more of a chance. The other thing is that, yes, they're scoring at a good rate, but it's because they're taking a lot of risks. And it's obviously coming back to hurt them in the averages. So, look, the only other thing, actually, two more points about all this. Let's just go back to the averages for a moment here, he says, confidently. If you have a look at the averages specifically, the only other team that I found, so I looked at this by Asia and not by Asia. And the by Asia number, actually, Australia didn't change that much. They were more or less the same. The team that was really interesting with playing in Asia was South Africa. They really struggled in the Asian conditions against the spinners, but they only played a handful of games. The other one was, I think, England scored very quickly against the spinners and didn't. But I'm just putting all that out there. Uh, you know, does this mean that Australia can't win the World Cup? No, because we don't know exactly what all the pitches are going to do. They should still qualify. They've lost the first game, but there's still a very good chance of winning 5 or 6 games all the way through. But when they do, if that is the case and they get to the finals, they're going to need the pitches to be better for batting than they are for spin. So far in this tournament, if I'm using my numbers, I would say that the pitches have been far and away better for spin than they have for batting. Only that Sri Lanka South Africa game is the only one. If this is a tournament where it's always better for spin than it is for the batters, that does actually really make it an issue for Australia. We saw today they still almost stole this game because of other things. Their tail standing up, their fast bowlers being really good. But a lot of things would have to go right for them at that stage. Anyway, that's the end of that. Let's just have a look at some other fun bits. No, fun's the right word, but I just want to have a look at India in the power play. So in the first 6 overs, you can see the broadcast showed a graphic. Up until that point, Mohammad Siraj and Jasprit Bumrah had bowled 3 overs each. Bumrah dismissed Mitch Marsh with what was it, like a back of a length ball, wasn't it? And that meant that they probably didn't attack as early as they normally would. But the Indian bowlers, I think, deserve a lot of credit for this as well. It eventually became spin dependent. But remember, if Australia are going in and they're playing in Chennai, they expect Jadeja to do well. They know that Ashwin's also going to do well. And Kuldeep's probably the best, strike spinner in the world, and maybe the best spinner in the world at the moment. So they would have wanted to get away from the seamers. And you could see here that India went with really good length bowling and really did restrict Australia quite a bit early on. And so from the first 10 overs point of view, these two guys, in Siraj and Bumrah are very, very good pairing. And if you think of what they can do on other surfaces, Mohammad Shami, there's a graphic coming up later that will show Mitchell Starc's wickets per match in ODI cricket. And I wanted to do a cutoff, so it was people who played, in 3, two full tournaments and quite a lot of games. And that meant that Mohammad Shami wasn't actually on it. He has, I think, something like 2.9 wickets per game in the World Cup so far. And yet, with Bumrah and Siraj, still such a strong start there. But let's just have a look at Pandya as well. Rohit brought him on from the end that Bumrah was going for. Obviously, he was the third seamer in this particular game. The idea was to rest their main paces. It was hot. We saw that a similar thing happen with Hazelwood as well. And obviously, they might have thought that Pandya and Smith was a decent matchup as well. But he went very, very short. And I think that's obvious. That is something that has got him success before. We've seen him do that in IPL games and everywhere else. It's a little bit different, I would have thought, when you're going up specifically against Australian players who were a little bit more used to that. I think if he'd followed what everyone else had done, the 2 other openers, and even what the Australian bowlers did, either length or back of a length at times where the Australian bowlers weren't, I think he would have been a little bit more. But didn't affect the game at all. Just something for Pandya to take a look at as he goes ahead. But certainly, I thought later on he looked a little bit better. It was more that early period, and he's occasionally going to have to bowl in the power play, right? Especially if they do want to go in with the 3 spinners and go again. And let's just talk about the Australian tail. It'd be nice to say something about them because tail end is not specifically supposed to be playing. Batting, I should say. Certainly, if you're South Africa, they're not supposed to bat. So Australia were 140 for 7 in the 37th over. They had no batters left at the crease as well. And the last 3 wickets added 59 runs in just over 13 overs. So about the same scoring rate as the top order. Worth noting, though, that those balls got really, really chewed up. If you had a look when India was bowling, that ball really, really was falling apart. So it was a softer ball. So it's not exactly like saying that they outbatted the top order. They have Cummins at 8, Stark at number 9. That's obviously way better than a lot of other teams. Australia's very lucky if you compare that to New Zealand or South Africa. Most teams don't have their frontline bowlers with that kind of batting skill. And Zampa and Hazelwood have also improved their bowling over the years. But if you have a look, Australia's tail, and again, all these numbers with Australia are so variable because their frontline bowlers don't always bowl. But Australia has done pretty well with their tail in the last couple of World Cup cycles. But just because it's here, it is worth saying that England on a completely different level than everyone else over here. Just absolutely phenomenal how they've been managed to do. So Australia doesn't do that, but we've seen Cummins. He's very good against seam bowling. It's a beautiful striker of the ball. Stark averages, I think he's got his average back over 20 in Test cricket as well. So a few things there. And the only other thing, which I teased a little bit before, but just wanted to have a look at this. This is World Cup wickets per match. This is all bowlers with over 35 wickets. So there are two guys that were just under this number, although if Shami plays in this World Cup, he'll go above this. But Brett Lee was slightly higher than Mitchell Stark, but not quite at 35 or around 35. The other one was Mohammad Shami, as I said before. But of the guys with lots of wickets, which is really who I wanted to compare Stark to, we've never seen a strike bowler at the World Cup do this as often as Stark has managed to do. And I just want to show, Wasim Akram is down here, and Alan Donald. I think these two being down here does show that the game has changed a little bit. But even guys like Malinga and Zahir Khan, very good bowlers, very clever bowlers. Stark is still up here. Interesting enough, Bolt. And the other question would be is whose wickets are more valuable, right? We may do this analysis later on, but Bolt's wickets probably would more come at the start, I'm guessing. Stark's wickets quite often come in the middle, though, when the batters are set. It would be a really interesting one to see who does better. And then just down here, Australia's coach, or assistant coach, I should say, Dan Vittori. Shakib's there as well. Most of these guys, left arm finger spinners, we expect them to be more economical. But it's a really interesting list. As I said, these are the guys who've played a lot of World Cups and taken a lot of wickets. This isn't a small sample size at all, which is why I kept it so high. I wanted to make sure it wasn't in a situation where we got a couple of people in. I didn't want Jeff Allett to be on this list. If you don't know who Jeff Allett is, Google Jeff Allett 1999 World Cup. I reckon I've mentioned him about 15 times already, but we thought that was really fascinating. And then the last one that we had here is just, we're talking about Hazelwood. I thought he bowled magnificently all the way through. Eventually got Virat Kohli out. Obviously, should have had him out a lot earlier. Really good the way that he got Rohit here with that LBW. Just a very good delivery, just doing enough. And then, of course, this one, a little bit more lucky. Shreyas Iyer sort of throws his hands through that one a little bit and ends up hitting it straight to cover point there, or cover, and that is out. That's all we have. India, much better today. Maybe got the better of the conditions for themselves. Although I would say that if you look at the game, and I can't remember if I mentioned this before, but I think if you look at the game, in some ways, Australian bowlers got the conditions that should have suited them more, and Indian bowlers got the conditions that should have suited them more. The big difference, of course, is that India knew what they were chasing, allowed themselves to play within, but huge win by India, net run rate boost, confidence boost. Probably want more than 3 batters making double figures. But they got past the team absolutely hammering their top order. All those things are really good signs going ahead. Got all three, some form under all 3 spinners. The seamers bowled very well. Hardik got to bowl in some low pressure situations later on without them having to worry too much about the game. A lot to like here, I think, from India. All right, we're going to have a quick break. Any questions you have, put them in the comments. If you have super chats, obviously they're the easiest ones because they just kind of highlight and it's easier for me to see. But any questions you have, put them in the comments. We'll be back after this, if I can find anything. We'll be back after this message from our sponsors. But thanks again. You're watching The Scorecard with Jared Kimber.
Have you ever wondered how I watch so much cricket? I use VPNs to log into accounts from all around the world. But because before, even simple things like when something exciting would happen in a match, I would rush over to social media, and when I got there, the clips would say something along the lines of, "This video is not available in your area." In fact, most of the coolest cricket stuff in the world at the moment is geo-blocked because some random board didn't sign a deal where you happen to live. If you're a hardcore cricket nerd, the only way is to have a VPN, and we suggest Surfshark. They will give you the speed of your favorite quick bowler. They're as inventive as a T20 batter after a bunch of dot balls, and they're as secure as a specialist wicketkeeper with the softest hands in the world. And guess what? The kind folks at Surfshark are going to give you a deal. Enter the promo code Kimber for an extra 3 months free at surfshark.deals/Kimber. There are probably other things that Surfshark can help you with, like data and identity theft and traceability and intrusive advertising. But for us, it is our best weapon against the evil cricket geoblock. Go to Surfshark and type my name in KIMBER and get 3 months free today.
All right, let's get rid of the scorecard and bring up the comment card. Probably didn't pull that off. Remember, please like, subscribe. We're going to be here every day of the World Cup. We've already done a bunch of shows, which you can find on this channel. The main channel has the other videos, so you can go and find those. There'll be one on KL Rule tomorrow morning, or in a few hours, probably, depending on where you are in the world. But there's plenty of stuff on that other channel. But this is the channel for all the lives. So if you want to see me and ask me questions, everything else will be recording from here every day of the World Cup. But yeah, like, subscribe, press the bell icon, do all those things that help. Share, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your enemies. And let's see what we have in the comment section today. Bubba says, hey Jared, don't you think Cummins looks like the weakest link in the Australian bowling? If they have to get an extra spinner in along with Green or Stoinis in the team, Cummins is the guy that goes out and he's the captain. What extra spinner? They don't have another spinner, right? So that's not going to happen. That's impossible. Look, we saw Green today. He bowled well at times, but they know he's not a frontline bowler yet. So Stoinis is not a particularly good one-day bowler. He's not a particularly good T20 bowler either. So I can't see how that's going to happen or anything. But they had Ash Nagar. I do think today, I think coming into the tournament, you know, having talked to people around the camp, I think they thought it might be, the ICC might give us a bunch of batting wickets. They thought that, you know, the last couple of World Cups have maybe been a bit more friendly to the bowlers. Maybe we'll get some runs, make it a little bit sexier. And they didn't think that. So I originally thought Ash Nagar plays in their 11. And they were very clear that wasn't the case. They wanted Glenn Maxwell and he was going to play. And so the Agar thing wasn't anything there. So there is no other spinner. The common thing on the bowling is, look, his actual record in one-day cricket, I think, is absolutely fantastic. I think it would be harsh to call him a weak link, because every now and again I think to myself, oh, he hasn't bowled particularly well in this game, and you know, and I don't like him as a T20 bowler, so there is that caveat a little bit. But in one-day cricket, he averaged 28, going at 5.2. He doesn't play enough of it, and I do think that is a bit of an issue with him specifically. They're not going to drop him. Not only is he their captain, and so they're not going to drop him, they're just not going to drop him. Like, if this happens at every World Cup Australia have played in the last couple of years, whether it be T20, whether it be even going back to 2019, one of their seam bowlers will have a bad game, and essentially everyone says, oh, that player's going to be dropped. But the player that you are bringing in is not going to be Pat Cummins. It's not going to be Mitchell Stark. It's not going to be Josh Hazelwood. And so from that perspective, I don't really see why people like Sean Abbott, right, is not going to come in and change this team, massively. He's not a better bowler than Pat Cummins. He's not a more talented bowler than Pat Cummins. He doesn't have more experience than Pat Cummins. And so Australia does give them, the fact that they hide their bowlers so much from white ball cricket, they don't play as much as they should. Cummins has now bowled, and I think this includes today, in 9 ODIs in the last 2 years, right? In those 9 ODIs, he has 15 wickets, an average of 24, and an economy rate of 5. If he'd played more, he would have a better record. He's only played 78 games in total. There's nothing particularly wrong with Pat Cummins. Doesn't mean he's going to have a good tournament or anything else. But it's worth saying that is the situation that Australia find themselves in. Sheldon says, now I seriously doubt the chances of Australia. I feel this team lacks the good old Aussie spirit. Well, it's nothing about Aussie spirit. They can't spin. So it's real. This is a channel where we don't worry about Aussie spirit. These players are resilient. They're professional. There was if Mitchell Marsh takes that catch today and Hazelwood or Green takes a wicket straight afterwards, Australia probably win this game. Would you then believe they had Aussie spirit? So the difference is that Mitchell Marsh was coming in to take the catch and was put off by the wicketkeeper a little bit and took his eye off the ball and made a mistake. Is that Aussie spirit? Because I've seen plenty of old 90s Australian teams do that. I've seen Steve Waugh drop some of the simplest catches of all times off skiers before, right? So what the issue really is here, it goes back to the first part of this video. They're not playing spin particularly well. If this is a tournament where you have to play spin at a reasonable standard all the way through, we get puffs of dust, we get fast turners, we get inconsistent bounce, we get more spin than on average on these pitches, all that sort of stuff, then Australia is going to struggle. Doesn't mean they can't beat some of the weaker teams and still get themselves to a chance of a semi-final. If they get a bunch of surfaces that are very smooth, and we're talking about 350 to 420 surfaces based on the game the other day, Australia will be a really good team in those situations. That is who they are. It's nothing to do with Aussie spirit. It doesn't even mean anything. It's just a made-up bullshit phrase that we use in Australia to make ourselves feel good, like every patriotic nation does. Bubba says, can you figure out a reason why Zampa was not put in right away when India was under pressure, considering Kohli has not been good against spin? Because the seamers had taken 3 wickets for no runs? Look, also, I would say, if anything, Hazelwood probably was taken off too early. So I don't think the problem was they didn't bring Zampa on at that stage. They even tried Maxwell. So from that perspective, and generally, Kohli, and the reason Zampa might not have come on and Maxwell might have come on is because there is data that suggests that Kohli prefers the ball spinning away than spinning in. But I think the bigger reason would have been that Zampa didn't want to be bowling in the 4th over. It wasn't their plan, even when they took wickets. 4th over, 5th over, whenever they took that, the 3rd wicket. I just don't think that was ever in the plan. The seamers were really doing well at that point. I think it made a lot more sense to bowl the way that they did. That's not how they lost it. Also, just to go back to this, what usually happens in these situations is we obsess over what Australia could have done right. Yeah, Hazelwood could have bowled more. Maxwell didn't need to bowl in the power play. They could have tried different fielding placements and all this sort of stuff. Essentially, they lost the game by only setting 200. Sometimes it's that simple. Shubhanka says, how does a player like KL, who's traditionally been an opener, end up performing well in the middle order? Usually it goes the other way around. No, I mean, it happens the other way, because generally what happens in white ball cricket is, if you're really good in white ball cricket, you get sucked into batting at the top of the order, because that is where you can have the most impact. So Butler is a really good example of a player like that, right? In T20 cricket, where so we have to get him earlier. And so generally, if you have all the skills and can do everything else, you get sucked into the top order. And that's been happening with ODI players since Mark Greatbatch, I suppose. Although, did Mark Greatbatch make a lot of runs before that series? I'm not sure. But that sort of thing has been happening. And you do see it before. I think Brian Lara might have also opened the batting in that 92 World Cup. So teams were already starting to think about that. And obviously, Sachin was another one. Then you have Mark Warren, Adam Gilchrist, and there's, Sanat Jayasuriya. It's a whole sort of revolution at that point. But the reason is because if you are in that situation, you can affect more balls, right? And so your best players are facing more balls. That's why it happens. In this specific situation, India have a lot of other top order talent. So KL could open in this, but Shubman Gill at the moment has the highest batting average in the history of ODI cricket. Virat Kohli could bat at 4, Rohit Sharma could bat at 4, but again, a similar kind of thing, they've been sucked in. We did a video about this recently, Shubhanka, where we were talking about how in Sri Lanka, I think Sri Lanka and Pakistan, I don't know if we looked at Bangladesh as well, but Sri Lanka and Pakistan, they usually leave their middle order players in the middle. Whereas in India, there's been, quite a few times when the players have been pushed up, Ganguly and, obviously other situations. And Rohit Sharma's kind of become an opener and was a middle order player, right? I think the only reason that KL isn't batting higher is specifically because the top 3 settled and they're happy with that. So instead of moving him back to open today, they thought it was probably a safer, from a role definition standpoint, you can bring someone in for 1 innings to open. That's probably easier than saying to KL, you're going to open now, but then next week you'll be back at 5, right? So their top 3 set. Number 4, Shreyas Iyer, is probably more, I would say out of the 2, I think they both have skills that could work at number 4. But and we've done a whole video over at the other channel about number 4s if you need to see it, and a podcast on it. I've probably got a tattoo about it somewhere as well. But I think Shreyas Iyer is probably more suited to bat number 4 in this team, and KRL is more suited to bat number 5. Doesn't mean that either of them couldn't switch and go around in the other order. But if you look at the way that those two have their skills, I think that makes a lot more sense in that. So the only other thing I would add to this is I think if you look at, there are some batters who are very good, who have skill sets that work in multiple different positions in a batting order, right? So Mike Hussey is a very, very good example of someone who could have opened in one-day cricket. It could also bat number 6 in one-day cricket. And in Test cricket, he could do the same. Not all players have those skills. A lot of players are very, very situational. Where they bat is really suited to certain parts of the game and certain kinds of positions. Obviously, we should move beyond that, and players should be more flexible. And I would actually say when you're training young players, that would be, if you have young batting prodigies in your side, they're going to go on to play professional cricket. Stuffing up their heads and making them bat into as many different positions as possible, and when you have them at academies and everything else, is the best thing, because then you will have a situation where whatever spot is available they can fit into, rather than the forward alarm situation where it's just like, well, everyone's batting in the middle order, all the old guys are batting in the middle order, they want to try one other young guy in the middle order. Now there's no place for another senior player to come into the middle order, whereas actually what should be happening is those guys playing in as many different roles as possible. But I think there are certain players who just do it naturally, just have that ability within them. KRL can open in a test match, and he could probably bat at number 6 in a T20 team if he had to. That kind of flexibility is rare, but does happen in some players. Jay says, I just want to say thank you. You're one of the guys who've been saying KL is the guy, but he needs to get out of the milestone mentality and get slow after 80. Still a problem. It's really important that everyone knows this. I've never said that KL is the guy. And what I mean by that is there was an overreaction to what I would say was a fluke series of events where in 2 World Cups, KRL made runs against bad teams and didn't make runs against good teams. And then because of that, and because of the frantic nature of World Cup cricket, the way that the Indian fan, the Indian casual fans tune in more for that amps it up. Social media becomes a meme because it becomes anything that becomes a pattern. So India suddenly they have a problem at number 4. No, they don't. They just had a bunch of injuries. They didn't have people available, and so they cycled through a bunch of people. That was a pattern that happened, and so everyone started to freak out about the number 4 position. But 2 minutes of research told me that India did not have a problem at number 4 for this ODI World Cup. The same as 2 minutes of research looking at KL Rahul in those 2 World Cups where he made runs against some teams and not against other, instantly told me that there wasn't an issue there because it's such a fluke pattern, right? And when you look at the rest of his career, making hundreds home and away, making runs in England against the new ball, playing really good innings when India do need him and all this sort of stuff, plus dominating the league with the toughest T20 bowling in the world. Tells you he doesn't have a weakness against good bowlers. He's great against some good bowlers, in fact. So it isn't about that kind of thing. The milestone mentality, I've talked about it before. It's a common thing right across cricket. It's still there. Australia tried to breed it out. Not sure they quite have. England are really trying to force it out. Again, they probably had more luck than most teams, but players do play for milestones. It's a thing. It's not an Indian cricket thing, and it's certainly not a KL thing. Sukant says, is that Ishan Kishan selection chances for this tournament? No, I mean, the one thing about this kind of World Cup is it's long and there's lots of games. There will be injuries. There might be tactical changes. You might want to rest players. So I wouldn't say that is him and he's not going to play. And certainly, look, he got a wide ball. He chased it, got the edge. Dak flies over slip and he ends up making the runs. We all think very, very differently. It's like, how do we fit him in? Two weeks ago, he was the talk of the town. He's still a very talented player. He just nicked off to a new ball. The new ball in one-day cricket at the moment is really hard. That first 8 overs or so, it is really, really hard to bat successfully in that period. So there's no doubt then that you are occasionally going to go out quickly. And trying to think, maybe we haven't seen the effect of that as much in this World Cup yet, but it will play a part all the way through. I'm trying to think, did England lose new ball wickets. I can't even remember now. God, we've had a lot of games already, haven't we? Yeah. All Things Cinema Vodka said, how super is it for Australia to have just one specialist spinner in their World Cup squad for these conditions? I think the bigger question would be, All Things Cinema, why do they only think they have one spinner who's any good? That's the issue, isn't it? I don't think the issue is the Agar thing could have gone either way. Maybe they made a selection mistake there, right? Which I would probably say they did. But they didn't think Agar was very good. Haven't they taken him to India twice and not played him? Like they really don't think he's that good. They don't think he was going to make an impact on them winning that tournament. That is the issue. I don't think the issue is selection, although that will probably be what is thrown back at them. The issue is that they don't actually believe they have a second spinner who can make an impact on them winning a World Cup, right? That isn't George Bailey's fault, Andrew McDonald's fault, or anyone, Pat Cummins' fault, or anything like that. That is something very, very different, right? That is something that they really have to worry about and be concerned about into the future. Will it cause them problems here? Yeah, perhaps. I think that Agar played in the T20 in the UAE, and then they got rid of him, didn't they, after a couple of games, which is probably a better format for him as well. I think that tells you all that you need to know. They don't really believe that much in Ashton Agar. Again, they took him to India for a test series, watched him bowl in the nets and sent him home. He is a really good athlete and a very smart cricketer in some ways, but if he's your second best white ball spinner, that's an issue. They've tried others. They had a young kid in South Africa recently. There's just not anyone else out there. And a friend of mine was from Australia was contacting me today about a similar kind of thing that you're saying. And I said, well, look, Matthew Shaw is a decent big bash option with the ball, and it's basically unbowlable in the IPL. It tells you a lot about conditions, but also the kind of spinners that Australia are producing, right? They don't translate particularly well when they're not bowling to Australian players of spin, who we've already shown earlier on the video are not particularly good, right? So it would be very hard for me to sit here and say that, that Australia have made a huge error when I don't think the second best option is someone that would have a big impact. I think I would have played him just because I figured that it was going to be more a spin dependent World Cup than they did. But I'm not sure I would have had that much more confidence in him. I don't know where Agar was in my spin tier, but he wasn't in tier 1, 2, or 3. Or else he was probably a tier 4 bowler from that point of view. And just big thanks to Raj, who is my first super chat on this channel, I think. So Raj Rohit, you absolute star. Remember, that's the best way to get questions through. I see we're starting to get more and more views on this, and so we will certainly get to them. But thank you to Raj. Hopefully for the whole duration of the World Cup, we will be trying to do these live streams every single day, Raj, where there's a live game. Where this must be our 4th one now. We're still working out the technology and everything. Paul Muku's running around in circles and everything. We've got the scoreboard working more or less how we want it to. We've got some technical issues with microphones and Wi-Fi connections and all those sorts of things that happen on occasion. But I really like doing these shows. I love talking about, rather than just talking about the hot topics, although you guys usually answer those questions of me as well. But I really like the ability to go back and analyze a game straight after it's happened. We know we're going to make some things wrong, and we're going to get fixated on things that don't help and everything else. But from my perspective, it's just something I really, really like doing. It goes back to the old Two Chucks days, if any of you are from that era and know what I'm talking about there. I'm going to take a very short break here. But thank you, Raj, for your super chat. I'm going to take, just a very short break here, and then we'll come back in a moment, and I'll just go through if there's any last questions, and then that'll be the end of the scorecard with Jared Kimber.
Love sports and want to write or podcast on it? Look no further than Fans with Laptops. It's a specialized course tailored for aspiring sports enthusiasts like you. Uncover the secrets of the press box, learn how to create compelling stories from scratch, and discover the best methods to share your content online. If you like these live chats, head over to our main channel where we have all sorts of video on this World Cup. There'll be several every week with all the latest trends, stories, and incredible historical content.
All right, welcome back. Scorecard with Jared Kimber, and let us see what we're going to finish with here. There's Raj again. And Sunit is under him. Says, what are your thoughts on Ashwin's strategy of not relying on his off spin that much? I don't really remember any of his op breaks ripping off like they usually would on this kind of pitch. I don't know if you saw the start of the video, Sunit, but he did do that. Look, we will do a video on this at some stage during the World Cup. I suppose what I thought is that finger spin, I haven't talked to Ashwin about this or any finger spinners about this, but if you look at the trend all the way through, finger spinners struggle to take wickets in ODI cricket and T20 cricket. The fact that it goes across both, I think, tells you a lot. And if you go back traditionally, we don't have ball by ball stats by this, but it passes the smell test. It's always kind of been that way, right? Mushtaq, Ahmed, and Warne, take the wickets. And unless you have a Murali, Suckling, Mushtaq, most finger spinners are more like Vittori and Shakib. I mean, we had it in the scorecard before, right? The finger spinners were the guys who took the lowest wickets per match compared to everyone else on that list. So Ashwin is smart and he knows all this, and I don't need to bring this up to him, and he's not on this channel now and watching and doing that. He knows this. We've seen him try it before. I think it makes sense. The only thing I would say to him is there are just going to be days when he just has to, hit then his off spinner. And this might have been a pitch where you just rip your off spinners just because it was in his favor. But on the pitches that are not in his favor, I want him to be able to do all those other things. I think it is a very important thing going ahead. Thank you for that. Sheldon says, what are your thoughts about the crowd in this World Cup? 1.5 months feels a very long tournament given October, November is festival season for India and all religions. I think there's enough people for in India to be able to come to the games. I don't think the problem's in the crowd specifically. I think that the ICC and, let's be honest, BCCI are really running this one, haven't gone out and really made it as easy for the fans as possible. I think, the ticket fiasco was terrible, right? And it's a blight on this tournament. But I'm not too worried about. There's always at World Cup events, if you go all the way back through history, it's always been a bit of an issue. England colonized all of our nations, right? And so lots of us end up back in England, like I am, right? Like I'm sure other people in this chat are probably from New Zealand or Pakistan or whatever, but they're based in England now, right? So England has a natural advantage when filling neutral games that the rest of the cricket world do not have. And that is going to be the case, but you have to plan ahead and you have to be smarter in how you deal with all these different things. I don't think the ICC is really doing that. Until the broadcasters start to really complain, that would be the time. And I would assume they've already complained, but maybe not enough where it affects the bottom dollar. Manad says, what makes Virat Kohli so good in ODI chases? So there are certain players who are, so if you look at Steve Smith in test matches, he's at his absolute best when all he has to worry about is batting, right? And you do see players like that. That's all they want to be able to do. If you tell me I'm going to have to go off and bat, I don't have to think about anything else. I'm just going to bat. And because of that, I will make runs. Then you have other players who really like to go out and bat. Now, I personally don't like to bat in the first innings. I much prefer to bat in the second innings. And I like to know how many runs per over I need to get. I need to know what total I'm chasing, how long I need to see this bowler off, how I can do this, when I can take a chance, when I can not take a chance, all these sorts of things. And in some ways, it takes away the thinking for you. That's unfair on people like Bevan and Kohli and Pollard and Dhoni and these sorts of guys, because they are thinking a lot. But it takes away a lot of the variables. And suddenly you're left with more of an equation. So you are batting towards that equation at that point. And I think that it just suits different personalities and different batting styles and everything else. So from that point of view, I think that's a big part of it. The other one is that he's very technically sound. He doesn't have a lot of flaws. And I think if you look at Dhoni and Bevan specifically as other players, I'm trying to think of other great second innings sort of one-day players. Their games are very, very well-rounded. They can manipulate the strike. They can hit boundaries. They can score off pace. They can score off spin. They've got a boundary option against kind of every kind of bowler that they go up against and all these sorts of things. Very good runners between the wickets. They can pressure on that way. Very rounded kinds of players. I know there's this theory that Virat Kohli is not very good against spin anymore, but he's still really good against spin compared to like other human beings on the planet. He might not be as good as Virat Kohli was before, but he's very good compared to everyone else. So from that perspective, I think that's a huge part of why all those things play. And when you are better than everyone else as well, and you know the equation, it's a big advantage, I think. Arnold says, have India peaked too early? Yeah, they're done. Absolutely done. The whole thing about peaking is that, like, it's true. Like, New Zealand would prefer to play the way they did against England in the final. But if you look at this particular India game, did they peak? Hardik was a little bit wasteful at times with the ball. They let Australia's tail score way more runs than they should have scored. They were then 3 for -20 or whatever it was. They could have been 4 down. This is not a peak performance from them. And I don't think it was a peak performance from South Africa or a peak performance from New Zealand. I say in these sorts of tournaments, bank up your wins early. Work on your issues towards the back end if you're ahead of the game. And then when you hit the World Cup, you should know everything that you need to know about your team, and you hope that you go and win it. I mean, that's the plan, isn't it? You know, I think that's the idea from everyone. Try and do that. Vikas says, good luck on the new channel. I've always liked your in-depth analysis. Well, I've always liked your super chats, Vikas. Do you think Stoinis will probably play in the 11 ahead of Labuschagne? I think they want Labuschagne specifically because they want someone who can rotate the strike against spin, which Stoinis can't do. And if you think about it, who do they have in that middle period that can do that? So I think Inglis is the more likely player. I think he's the one, someone who does know about, who can play spin really, really well, the way that he does. He's the best chance of being able to rotate the strike and do all those sorts of things. Having said that, I think that it's very fair to say that he didn't do it today. And whether he can do it against the best spinners in the world on helpful surfaces, we're going to find out. Inglis is there. I feel like Inglis is one of those people who's always in the squad and never gets to play. What's the guy from England whose name I've forgotten? My God, from Kent. I can't believe I forgot his name. Sam Billings. Inglis is getting strong Sam Billings vibes at this point, right? But that would be the change, I think, would make more sense, because I don't think Stoinis is going to be able to knock around the spinners any better than Marnus did. And he's not being groomed for that role. Stoinis is supposed to bat further on. So the other option is you bring Carey up, who's a bit limited. You give Green up, who's probably not ready. It's not ideal. Inglis is their chance if that's what they want to go with. But the fact that Marnus was out of the squad, came in for a spinner, and then is in the squad, I think tells you the way they think about Marnus compared to the way they might feel about anyone else. Anyway, Vikas, thank you very much for your super chat. And my second super chat on this new channel that we've got. Please like, subscribe, follow, do all the things that we need. We will be here every day. We go through. If you came late and you were like, oh my God, this guy's answering all these questions, go back to the start of the video. There's no questions then. It was just analysis and lots of fun. But thank you so much. I know it sounds weird, but in a tournament like this, when it's a game every day, it's quite full on. So to know that so many of you have already come over to this new channel and embrace what we're doing on this show is absolutely brilliant. There's a great video that we did yesterday on Aiden Markram breaking the World Cup record. Go and watch that. And then, in a few hours, we'll have a video up on KL Rahul and why people don't think he's as good as he is when he is as good as he is. That doesn't mean I think he's the guy. I just think he is quite literally a guy who can bat. And sometimes, that's enough. See you again tomorrow.
If you follow my work, you'll be very tired because I produce a metric ass ton of content and I can't do all of that myself. I also can't afford an army of people to do it for me. So what I needed was a solution to get all my analysis, hot takes and random asides out on social media. And I found that with Memento, the AI tool that basically takes all of my work and cuts it up, makes it look pretty and pushes it all over the internet. If you have content and you need to repackage it, use Memento. If you enjoy, I'm a test guy, but I understand I live in a T20 world. So I'm still going to chat. Have you ever considered a career in sports? If you're passionate about writing, creating videos, or podcasting within the sports realm, I have the perfect course for you, Fans with Laptops. It is based on my career of someone who broke into this job despite the fact that at the age of 28, I was parking cars for a living. Take advantage of all the mistakes I made, use your passion, and enroll in the course today. Express your cricket fandom with Bodyline t-shirts. Discover their extensive range of player-inspired tees, featuring cricket legends such as Murali, Warne, and Wasim. With team-themed designs and options for hardcore cricket nerds, they've got you covered. I know that you think you could run your favorite cricket team better than those who do, but no one is going to let you do that. So why not try Wicket Cricket Manager to satisfy that urge? Pick your nation, pick your league, pick your players, and yell at them when they do poorly. You can find it in the links below or by searching for Wicket Cricket Manager in your app store today.